You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I'm a USA Today bestselling author of over 30 published novels and a high school English teacher. And on this week's episode, I have Mark Edward Langley, and he is going to be talking about his Arthur Nakai series. And specifically, I had the chance to read the third book, When Silence Screams. So Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, hi, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be on the show here. Mark Edward Langley started writing a long time ago, it seems like now. Oh, God, like 25, 30 years ago, and finally got published back in 2016, and I've been going good since then.
That's great. And this is something that we connected because you're working on a new series, and we'll chat about that toward the end. But first, Sure. Tell us a little bit about this series, Arthur Nakai series, and an overview of who the character is that we'll be talking about.
Arthur Nakai is a former Marine and 12 years in Border Patrol. And now this is the first book running his own business in northwestern New Mexico there, and falls into trying to find out who kidnapped his wife in that book. And that plot goes from that area right around there all the way up through the mountains of Montana and a dangerous snowstorm confrontation up there. I tried to think of a character that would reach a lot of people. And his wife, Sharon Keone Nakai, works for a fictitious, of course, television station down there. And he uses with her sometimes the information that she may have being in the news industry. The first book went over really well, and I had the second one, the second one was Death Waits in the Dark after that. And then, of course, the one you read, When Silence Screams, the third novel there. And Arthur has grown ever since that first book, along with the rest of the characters that are in there. Each of those books are a standalone book, but there is a thread going through all of them of Arthur and his wife struggling to come back from the stillbirth death of their first child.
And you bring a lot of different elements that can be difficult for readers. For one, as you mentioned, losing a child. And in this one, there's definitely some aspects of the story that I want to give listeners a heads up on first, in case it is something that they're not comfortable listening to just let them know ahead of time. So we are dealing with abuse and human trafficking. And there are some aspects where I wouldn't say it's overly graphic, but there are descriptions of some of the things that are happening that might be difficult for some readers. So I did just want to throw that out there. Those topics may come up during the interview. And for anyone who maybe wants to skip this episode, I have that out there so they may do so.
I sure hope they don't, because portions that I did put in, like the character I have that runs the women's shelter in Albuquerque there, I spoke with a woman who I pretty much ended up using her entire backstory for the backstory of that character because it was so compelling to me. And she was gracious to let me authority to go ahead and do that. So I gave that as that character there. The one thing people need to understand, too, is that what you're shown or told on television or news or whatever, or movies, is only a small portion, if anything, of what actually happens. And all the, newspaper articles and so forth that's been done about it has talked about how that looks and how that sounds when you read it. But I felt it needed to be there to let people truly understand why this is such an important topic in a lot of different ways.
Well, and I want to come back to that. how you researched things, why you made the choices that you did as far as what's included. But first, before we get into that, give our listeners just a little bit of a sense of the starting premise of When Silence Screams. Gave us the history of Arthur Nakai. So where are we at as this book starts? And then if you want to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that he encounters, because as you said, this is a very difficult case for many reasons.
Yeah, well, Arthur, at this point in time, has earned his private investigator license, so he's free to do a lot of different things that he wouldn't be able to do on his own without that. And he ends up actually helping anybody that comes to him for help, not necessarily for the fact of getting paid or anything. This particular case comes to his doorstep when the mother of a 19-year-old girl and her brother arrives and seeks him out to ask him if he would help finding her, because the police and FBI, which in most times doesn't actually give the help that they need or can't afford to or whatever, but he decides to take on the case to track her down, like typical things that happens today, that the girl was online and got it hooked up with a online fake profile. And when she and her parents were in Santa Fe at the Palace of Governors there for the jewelry show, she wanders off to get ice cream and doesn't come back. So after 6 months of waiting for the police and the FBI to find something out, her mother gets very distraught about that and seeks Arthur out to have him see if he could find her.
Thank you. I think that gives people a good starting point for our conversation. There are a lot of layers to this story. We have the social aspects of how predators come in contact with people, the limitations in a lot of these instances of law enforcement, and how easy it is, or it appears to be in many cases, for these victims to disappear from society. So there's a lot of layers that make these really challenging cases to resolve, and particularly for the families involved who have people who've gone missing, waiting and not having that closure. And it's hard to imagine living through that and just how awful that would be. But you really dive into all of these aspects. So it sounds like you did a lot of interviewing and personal research. So tell me a little bit about the process of preparing to write such a multifaceted story where there's a lot at play in what's going on in a situation like this.
Well, this book actually took me some years to get started, but as I was writing the other books, I was making notes and so forth for this one. And it all started back in 2016 when I saw a report that 5,712 girls and women went missing on the reservations in the USA and Canada. So I started delving into that because you see that number, it's a large number, 5,712. And I went on to Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's website and looked up things, and I saw all of the flyers, we'll say, of all these girls and women giving hair color, eye color, age, weight, the whole 9 yards. And when you see all the faces, I printed most all of them out so I could have them as reference and just to remind me. And when you see all those faces, it's not just a number, because it is someone's daughter, it is someone's girlfriend, wife, whatever. And when you stop to think about it, like is mentioned in the book, that when someone goes missing like that, it's not just that they're missing, but everything that was to come may never happen. They may never fall in love, they may never get married, have children, graduate college or whatever. All these milestones that people have for their family members just seem to stop. Time stops at that point, and there's nothing that you're thinking about it constantly, and every day something is missing and you're missing out on different things. So as I researched it online and the people I talked to, it just got to be such a story that stuck with me that I started developing characters and backstories and doing the whole breadth of work on it. And then finally, when I got to actually writing it, it took about a year to write it, and I just had everything set up and put it on paper. And my wife always reads my novels first. She'll go through there and see if she can find errors or whatever, or can figure out who the killer is before it even happens, But she came to me when she read that, and it affected her. Yeah, I mean, times she cried, times she laughed, and times that she cheered on the things that were happening, that this girl would be able to escape or be found by Arthur, But it affected her a lot, and the people that I talked to, I used a lot of their things in there because that's actually what happened happens. Movies and television don't really give you a lot of that because they really can't, but it's something I wanted people to know about. And it's a hard subject, yes, but I think people need to know the breadth of it.
And I totally get that. I think that, like you said, media portrayals don't always show the reality. And maybe even if it's, bringing awareness to the fact that these things are happening is a good thing, but understanding the realities of some of these situations, I think not only just is helpful for awareness, but I think that can also play a role in recognizing some of these situations if we understand them better. Yeah. I think that's something that people, even in small towns, are surprised to learn is happening in their town. That there are men and women, mostly women, but I know that this does occur with men as well, the human trafficking. Right. That, if you're not aware that it might be in an area where you are, it may never occur to you to see the signs and notice something seems a little wrong with what's going on here.
My 2 granddaughters were born, they're 5 years old now. And once they were born, that's when it really hit me that what would happen if something happened to them? What if they got on the bus to go to school one day and then didn't come home from school? It's terrible to think about, but I'm always thinking about things. And my son-in-law, he's got an older daughter, and you're connected on social media and so forth. So I'm watching what's going on and things like that, and looking for signs of this and that, and thankfully nothing ever got going with that with her. But you never know. I mean, it's not like you're not letting your child live, but you have to have some point that you have to be aware these things are out there and things to look for and so forth. But them being born and being 5 now, it just sticks with me that I couldn't think what I would do, if something like that happened.
Yeah, it's really hard to fathom.
Across someone who did it. You can't put yourself in that place, and you try to, and you research things, and that's when you realize that everything from that moment on stops. Your life rambles on, but everything concerning that person stops. You're on hold until you know, and it's terrifying and it's tragic. It's just one of those things that you never want to go through.
Absolutely. And we know that there are so many families who are still waiting for answers, and hopefully they come at some point. But like you were mentioning, I think just that awareness and kind of knowing what to be out on the lookout for, especially as parents, because you point out in this that this young woman that Arthur is searching for came from an area that was pretty isolated, small area on the reservation, but yet she is still able to end up being in contact with human traffickers, unbeknownst to her at the time, through social media. And that's something, as parents, it can happen without you even realizing if you're not aware that it can happen, and regularly, checking and having those safeguards on in situations to help prevent that. How did you decide how this story was going to start off? What was going to be that moment that connected this young woman from a small, out-of-the-way place that we wouldn't think crime is just around the corner for her? Because it seems like a small, safe community, but she gets brought into this overall storyline through that connection of social media. So what led you in that direction and got this story going?
Well, I was talking to the one woman I was talking to about her situation and read a lot of articles about things like that. And that's how a lot of things start, because the social media, it's a mystery above all, too, but the social media aspect of it is just what can happen on a daily basis. Everybody is on their phone. Everybody's on their iPad. Everybody is meeting people around the world every day, never knowing anything if they're real or not. Online can be a very dangerous place. It can be a good place and share with your family and friends and that kind of thing. But you never know if the picture is real, if the backstory is real or whatever. If you don't know these people. Like one day I saw a supposed clothing manufacturer putting messages on my granddaughters saying, "Oh, you should model for us. We'll send you some clothes and this." And I go, you might want to watch out about that one,
Mm-hmm.
But so she never got involved with that, which is a good. But overall, I wanted things to start out in the middle of it. And you meet April Manygoats being held captive. And that's where the whole story starts there. And as you read the whole thing, the mystery of it is that everything you read, you think is one thing, ends up being something else. And it all just, I try to plot my chapters out, each one at a time. So I have like 30, we'll say 25 or 30 chapters already plotted out when I start writing, so that I have an ending. I know where I'm going to end up and what's going to happen, which may change because, as you know, as you write things, your characters have different ideas and say different things that you would normally think about doing like that, where it just leads a different direction, but you still get to that same end result. And I like stories that lead you one way and then bring it back to something else. So I wanted to do it that way. And my characters at that point in time, are so developed, with Jake Delagotti being the police captain and all the other ones that are in there, his wife and the guy that works for him, the kid that works for him, all these things. I developed certain characters to fit certain molds of what I just envisioned in my head with that. So I hope people will read it and enjoy it and understand it, but look past some of the things that are in. I didn't get too graphic. I mean, I think there's a lot, it could have been a lot worse, but I apply the old Hollywood storytelling where it brings you up to a point and passes over that point and picks up after that point, so your brain will then try to fill in what you didn't read.
That works for a variety of situations. It's hard to always know exactly how much a reader can handle or wants when it comes to things like violence or even sexual content and things that people have their own individual tolerance for. And that can be really hard to judge as a writer. So I was going to ask you kind of how you worked with those scenes. Did you go back and forth, or at this point in book 3, do you just kind of have a sense of where that balance is? Because this is something that I think for newer or younger writers who want to write some of these topics where there is violence or there is some of these more graphic scenes, but what limit do you take it to? Where do you know? Where's that moment where you cut away and let the imagination fill in the gaps and then come back? So how did you approach that? And maybe what advice might you have to someone who is attempting a similar style of writing?
Basically, I would guess to know your audience. Know they're adult books. They're not adult books, but they're like a Craig Johnson, they're C.J. Box. I mean, they're for adult readers to read, not young adults. But you have to at least know the people that are going to possibly read your book. You don't want to get too graphic. You don't want to get where you're explaining everything and showing everything, telling everything. You want to leave some things to the imagination that will further what you wrote, and their mind will just start going and reeling in different ways about that, so they'll pick up on it. And even if you pick up after whatever it is, like I did in the book several times, that what their mind will fill in sometimes is a lot more than you would ever write. Mm-hmm. And you be aware of that it's good to show some things, but lead them to a point and let their mind fill in certain things and pick up after that, so that you're not giving them everything on the page reading in black and white. I guess it's just know who you're writing for. If you like that and you write that, that's fine, but if you want a broader audience base, don't get really super graphic on things, but just lead them up to it, let them fill it in, and then pick up after it.
I think that's great advice. I think reading in your genre, and if you like a certain style, who are the people who read that, and what are those limits that you see in similar books of what you're trying to model and be, part of. You always think of it like, where in a bookstore, where would your book go on a shelf, and who is going to go to that shelf to look for that book? And that can be a really great exercise in, I think, finding those limits and balancing out things like.
When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Like that. So thank you. That was a great comment. I appreciate that.
I'm very glad that, a lot of people online have given it 5-star reviews and so forth. And three actually newspaper articles on there about it were fantastic about that. So I'm glad that it was welcomed very well. So that just makes me happy.
Well, and the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was developing the mystery, because you have, like I said, a lot of layers to this. And then through the early portion, we're also meeting one of your other characters that you mentioned, Jake Billigody. He's in the beginning on what appears to be a separate track. And we're kind of following his investigation at the same time that Arthur Nakai is working through his investigation of trying to find this young woman. So how do you approach planning your overall mystery? You said you do outline the chapters. What's your overall approach to building in the complexity of a complicated mystery like this?
They all have their points and place to play in the storyline, because a lot of times, no matter whose novel you read of like that, the protagonist often has a different way of doing things and different area to go than the actual law enforcement can go on their end. So there's things they have to rigidly stick to, and the person off to the side can go and do what he wants to do and discover things. I like to think that, they each come together. Of course, Jake is one of his contacts as well, and they kind of work together a lot of times throughout the books. But it's just that Jake has to do his thing, Arthur has to do his thing, FBI have to do their thing. But to try to pull them all together and change, he has to go his path, he has to go his path. So it's like he needs to tell Arthur some things and not some things, and Arthur has to not tell him things but tell him things. It's like a dog and cat kind of thing, or cat and mouse deal. But
well, tell me a little bit more about, you have a rich cast of secondary characters who, in at least this one, we don't see as much page time for Sharon and some of the kind of ancillary people who help throughout the investigations. But they still have a presence and they're memorable. And that can be challenging to do with secondary characters who don't get a lot of page time. And I think one of the things I noticed with this, and I haven't had the opportunity to read the first 2 books to, spend more time, but even coming into the series at book 3, you have these secondary characters who do stand out, who play a role, but Sharon's not right there with him throughout the investigation. So building on kind of your previous work and maintaining these other characters as part of the story, not leaving anybody out as you go along, does that get challenging at times to make sure you're taking those moments to bring her back in, or to, have these contacts with some of the other characters so it's not just Arthur all the time on his mission, because you really bring in the rest of his world by including these contacts with the secondary characters throughout the story. What was your approach to that, and how do you accomplish that?
Thanks for noticing that. I always learned a long time ago, even in film, that it can be a very small character with a very small part, but it could be a big part how that person portrays that character. So I always kind of keep that in the back of my head, that in the first 2 books, Sharon was a major player along with Arthur and the rest of them, because he had to find her in the first book. She helped out in the second book. And it's one of those threads that go along, is that they're seeing a psychologist, about getting over the moving ahead from the stillbirth and getting things back on track. And I wanted her to be there, that even while he's working and doing this and she understands that, there's a little dynamic of that, well, we're supposed to be here meeting with her and having our conversation, and you're not here. I'm the only one who's here and you're not here, So I wanted to bring that kind of aspect into it with that. And the other characters just kind of rolled in there, but I try to make each one memorable and each one have something to say that will make you think of what they're saying. But I wanted to focus on Arthur and his wife and their separation while trying to move forward with the psychologist, and Arthur not being present all the time for that.
Well, and it does add a very human aspect to him, where I think especially in something that's kind of action related, it can be hard to always maintain that humanness. But I think that those check-ins and reminders with Sharon really helped accomplish that in this book.
I'm glad, yeah, because I wanted to get that across, and I wanted, people to understand. You can't just have the main storyline. You have to have a subplot kind of thing going on. Mm-hmm. And their story, to me, really resonates with life. These people are going through their life like everybody else goes through their life. And to be wrapped up in that and read that, you get time to be in that life along with them. So you understand that they're normal people like everybody else. And they have problems, and they're trying to get through things and straighten out. And Sharon wanting to be on the clock to try to move forward and have another child, and Arthur wanted to be away from the clock, and all that. But let's try it without that and just let things happen, and so forth. But that people go through that. But people that are wanting to have a child, they go through, well, we have to do this on the clock thing, and whatever it may be that they are told to do or think they have to do. And just let things happen. But there's a dynamic between those two. Again, a lot of these small characters in there that I have are mixture of people I knew throughout my life. The one kid that helps them out with the closed circuit TV and where they tries to track down who has her, that person is a person that I grew up with pretty much and had a job with and so forth. But he was a character. I love the name Swanee that I give him in there. But his little backstory is the same backstory as the guy I knew and so forth. And I told him about it. I said, you're in the book. So, it's just, you got to find yourself, But like the second book, I gave credit to one of the guys that was one of my friends when I was young that was in the military. And sat and talked with him for like 5 hours and got a lot of stories from him about certain things. And the second book, that really worked out and helped me get that down with the military thought process and how to come out of that and still some way be sane. But it all goes around. I got the biggest compliment. I was on a radio show in Tucson, and the two guys that run it were both veterans. And the one guy says, I'll tell you that when I read this book and I read your characters that were in the military, they all seemed real to me. And I thought that was just an incredible thing to hear that I had struck that chord with them.
That's great. Well, and Mark, we are just about out of time, but I did want to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about the new series that you're working on and shopping out right now, the Sky Roanhar series. Tell us just a little bit about what people can look forward to and where they can find you to keep an eye on the progress of that.
Well, if you want to keep an eye on the progress there, you can go to markedwardlangley.com. Go on there, sign up for the newsletter. And I put snippets of chapters in there when I do a newsletter, keep people up to date on the storyline, what's going on with it in general. Sky Roanhar was somebody I created that I wanted to find somebody that wasn't like any other character out there, that wasn't a small town sheriff or a forest person or whatever it may be, but I wanted to have him his own deal. So I looked and studied and could not find a character like a New Mexico livestock inspector. So then I got a hold of the deputy director of the NMLB and talked to him for a long time. He answered all my questions. We got a great rapport going on that. So I developed this character of Sky being at first in the military, the Army, and then after that being part of a New Mexico state trooper and coming one night, having a tragedy happen that just spiraled him out of control on a lot of things. He lost his job, his family, his daughter, and so forth. If not for his friend who he went to the academy with to pull him out of where he was, he wouldn't be where he is now as a livestock inspector. And I thought it would be great to have this character and just build on him. And the characters just seemed to fall together with the first novel and almost halfway through more of the second novel, while my agent is now trying to still, get that first one out. A lot of editors have said they loved it. They're just trying to get their head around things and so forth. And she's constantly putting things out there, which I'm lucky that the second agent I have here now, because the first one retired, I looked into it and secured the Liz Trupinpuli, which is actually Ann Hillerman's agent. So I've got that going for me there, and hopefully she has more ins and outs and can figure things out and do things. But I love that character, and his life is just amazing. So I sat with, like I said, the deputy director and got all the information from him and worked everything together to form that character and all the other characters. And a lot of the secondary characters that are in there playing ranchers and people he deals with in that job of livestock inspector are all people I grew up knowing from the hills of Ohio and so forth, that just were incredible characters back there to then. I didn't realize that until now, but there's just a wealth of people to draw from in my life for that. I'm also working on the first book of that, the second book of that, and the fourth book of the Arthur Nakai series, which once I finally, after all this time now, I have the title I'm going to use, called Man in the Maze, and I'm going to use that retrospective with Arthur's career in CBP to bring that into fruition there too. But a lot of things are going on with that. A lot of things in the second book. Arthur's getting more Sky's getting more fleshed out as we go, and I love both these characters and all the people that inhabit their world.
Well, that's wonderful. And you've got a lot going on, and I wish you the best of luck with finding just the right home for the Sky Roan Horse series. We are out of time, so I do want to remind our listeners before we sign off that we were talking today with Mark Edward Langley about the book When Silence Screams, and he's got plenty more in the future to look out for as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Mark.
I love it. Thank you very much for having me.